All right. Before we even get into definitions, logic, or examples, I want to slow the room down for a second. Because whenever the word prophecy comes up, emotions immediately come with it. For some people, prophecy represents hope. For others, it represents certainty. For others, it represents fear, urgency, or even identity. So I want to be very clear about my posture here. When I say I'm not impressed by prophecy, I'm not saying that people are foolish for believing in it. I'm not saying faith is stupid. And I'm not saying believers are lying or pretending. What I am saying is that once you step back and look carefully at how prophecy actually functions, it stops looking divine, and foresight starts looking like a very human way of making sense of the world after things happen. And that matters because we live in a world where prophecy is often presented as evidence, as proof, as something that should override doubt, skepticism, or even basic questions. And I think it's worth asking calmly, honestly, without hostility. Does prophet really do what people say it does? Or does it mostly feel powerful because it's being interpreted through some type of hindsight? So that's the question for today. Not does prophecy mean or feel meaningful? Not does prophecy bring comfort? But does prophecy actually demonstrate knowledge of future events before they happen? Those are very different questions. I'm CJ Everson, and welcome to The Jewish Skeptic. One of the reasons prophecy feels so convincing is because it aligns perfectly with how the human mind already works. Humans are not neutral observers of reality. We don't just experience events. We interpret them, and then we narrate them, and we connect them to stories we already believe. When something significant happens, I'm talking about like a tragedy or a war or political shift or a cultural collapse, The first thing most people ask isn't what caused this in a purely mechanical sense. The first question is always almost around, well, what does this mean? And meaning is where prophecy thrives. When someone says this was foretold, it doesn't just explain the event. It kind of organizes it. And it turns randomness into purpose. It turns chaos into intention. And that feels good. And it can even feel stabilizing. But feeling stabilization and being evidential are not the same thing. There's something I want you to notice. Almost no one treats prophecy as impressive before something happens. People don't usually say, let's stop everything right now, because this verse clearly predicts this exact future event in a way that cannot possibly mean anything else. Instead, what happens is this. Something happens first. Then people go back to a text and say, look, it was always there. See, that order actually matters, because if the claim only looks impressive after you already know the outcome, then the claim didn't guide understanding. It followed it. Take statements like, there will be wars and rumors of wars. Would that not have been true? I mean, at what point in human history could you honestly say no wars, no rumors, no conflict anywhere? Statements like that don't narrow the future. They describe permanent features of human societies. So when someone points to modern wars and says, see, prophecy fulfilled, what they're actually saying is this vague statement can be applied to something that already happened. And to me, that's not a prediction. It's more like flexibility. So let me take a moment and really sit with this idea of post hoc reasoning. Because once you understand it, a lot of things will click really quick. For the ones that don't know, post hoc simply means after the fact. I actually did a podcast on this a while back about post hoc. um, what's a good word for it? I don't know, but go check my videos and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's post hoc reasoning is when we look back and draw conclusions once the ending is already known. Oh, it was post hoc prophecies. I talked about Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Hosea on how they were post hoc. Go check the videos if y'all want to check it out. And here's the important part. I mean, post hoc reasoning feels insightful even when it's not. Now, let me give you a completely non-religious example. Think about how people talk after a breakup. I mean, you'll hear things like, I knew it wasn't going to work. Or I saw the signs from the beginning. Red flags, as society says now. Or I can tell something was off with them. Something just wasn't right. But notice something when that happens. Those insights almost never show up before the breakup now, do they? They appear after. Now imagine someone who says the same thing no matter what happens. If the relationship ends, they say, well, I knew it. And if it succeeds, they say, well, I meant there would be challenges. That person can never be wrong. Now, can they? And that's exactly the problem. A claim that cannot be wrong cannot demonstrate that it's right. That's the core issue with prophecy. If a prophecy can be identified as true after an event happens, then it's not functioning as a prediction. It's functioning as a story-making tool. And stories can be very powerful. And they can be very meaningful. And they shape lives. But they are not the same as evidence. So before we even get into specific religious examples, I want you to sit with this question. Would you accept this kind of reasoning anywhere else in your life? If not, why does it suddenly become persuasive when it's labeled prophecy? Now, y'all think about that. I gave you enough time to think about it. Now, this is the part where people usually start to feel a little uncomfortable. Not because it's overly aggressive, but it exposes something subtle. Prophecies fail, and they fail all the time. End of the world dates pass, Specific timelines come and go. Predicted generations, they die out. Major events don't unfold the way they were promised. And yet prophecy itself is never considered a failure. That should immediately raise a question. Why not? Well, because in religious frameworks, prophecy is designed in a way that failure is never allowed to count as failure. It's pretty smart of you theologians. When something when something seems to line up, people say, see, God said it would happen. But when it doesn't line up, the response is always never, then the prophecy was wrong. Instead, it becomes, well, you misunderstood it, or you took it too literal. Sometimes I've even heard, well, it was symbolic, or it just hasn't happened yet, or God's timing isn't our timing, or that damn devil. Now pause for a second and really think about what that means. There is no outcome. None. Where prophecy is allowed to be wrong. If it happens, whoop-dee-doo, it's fulfilled. If it doesn't happen, it's all of a sudden postponed or reinterpreted or spiritualized. That's no type of strength to me whatsoever. That's more of like insulation. And this is important to say clearly and calmly. A claim cannot fail, cannot demonstrate truth. In every other area in life, failure matters. If a meteorologist jacked up the weather forecast and says it'll rain tomorrow and it doesn't, then that forecast is wrong. If a medical treatment claims to have cured a disease and it doesn't, it failed. If a financial prediction misses the mark, it loses credibility. But prophecy exists in such a protected category where failure is never allowed to count. And that's not evidence. To me, that's belief preservation. And again, I'm not saying that people are lying. Most believers sincerely believe these explanations, like your prophets. But sincerity doesn't turn unfalsifiable claims into reliable ones. So now I'm going to shift, and here's where this will widen out a little bit. If prophecy were genuinely impressive, meaning clear, specific, and predictive. Don't you think we'd expect it in a point to where it's consistent in one direction? But that's not what we see. These Christians claim fulfill prophecy. And the Jews claim fulfilled prophecy. And Islam claims fulfilled prophecy. And I even know of some Hindu claims that have fulfilled prophecy from studying theology. Even newer religious movements point to prophecies that they believe have come true. And people, they can't all be correct. Their claims contradict each other. Their timelines conflict. These conclusions are mutually exclusive. So how is it possible that everyone thinks that their specific prophecies work? Because they all are using the same methodology. Vague language, long time horizons, symbolic phrasing, and post hoc interpretation. Sorry, not sorry. Every group looks back at events through the lens of what they already believe and finds comfort and confirmation. That doesn't make them dishonest. It just makes them more human, in my opinion. When you're inside of a belief system, interpretation feels obvious. It feels natural. It can even be undeniable. But come with me. Step outside that little system, even just slightly, and watch the certainty disappear. This is why prophecy convinces insiders far more than outsiders. Not because outsiders are closed-minded, but because insiders already accept the framework that gives the prophecy its meaning. Now, I start getting a little fast there, so let me dial this thing back. I want to slow this part down because this is where people often misunderstand the critiqueness of my knowledge. Pointing out post hoc reasoning is not calling believers stupid. It's not mocking faith. And it's not dismissing people's lived experiences. People find real comfort in belief, real structure, real community, and the biggest one of all, to me, hope. And to me, those things matter. But meaning and truth are not the same thing. Something can feel deeply meaningful without being a reliable way to determine what is objectively true. And if we don't make that distinction, then anything that feels meaningful becomes untouchable. And that's quite dangerous. Not because faith itself is evil, but because it shuts down honest inquiry. You don't honor truth by protecting it from questions. You honor truth by letting it be tested. And when prophecy is examined, using the same standards we apply everywhere else. It simply doesn't do what people claim it does. It doesn't make believers bad people. It just means belief systems operate differently than evidence-based systems. So let's end this by asking a fair question. And y'all still got to answer that other question too. But I'm going to give you another one that I want you to think about. What would impressive prophecy actually look like? I don't think it wouldn't be poetic. It wouldn't be symbolic. It wouldn't be vague. It would be clear before the event, very specific, time bound, and kind of risky. Testable by people who don't already believe. It wouldn't require reinterpretation after the fact. It wouldn't survive by flexibility. It wouldn't need help defending or explaining why it didn't really mean what it said. It would stand on its own. Until then, to me, prophecy does not demonstrate divine foreknowledge. It demonstrates something very human. Our ability to look back, find patterns, and tell stories that make events feel intentional. That's the word I'm looking for. So it wouldn't be so mysterious. It'd be based more around psychology. So when I say prophecy isn't impressive, I'm not attacking faith. I'm explaining why post hoc reasoning isn't evidence. You don't need anger to see this. You don't need mockery. You don't need hostility. Just honesty. And if you disagree, that's fine. But make sure you're disagreeing with the argument, not just the discomfort it creates. because discomfort is often the first sign that a belief is being examined instead of protected. If this conversation helped you think more clearly, like, subscribe, or even share. I'd really appreciate that. And I'll see y'all on the next episode. Remember, no fear, no dogma, just clarity. Once again, I'm CJ Everson, and I am the Jewish skeptic.
Do you know what I found? The more you know, the less you know.